My name is David Larry, and I am 90 years old. I was born on the 16th of January 1936 in Fairhope, Alabama, in the United States of America. I was born in a small town, quiet streets, the kind of place where everybody knew your father's name before they knew yours. I grew up there, married my amiable wife Ruth in 1960 when I was 24 years old, raised 2 children with her, a son and a daughter, watched them grow into people I am proud of, and somewhere along the way, I got old. Ruth passed a few years ago. I still reach for her hand in the morning sometimes, before I remember. I am telling you this today, not because I think my story is special. It is not. That is actually the point. My story is ordinary, and that is what makes it worth hearing. I have been sitting with something for a long time now. A heaviness. Not grief exactly. Not regret in the sharp dramatic way people describe in movies. It is quieter than that. It is the kind of feeling you get when you are standing in a room and you suddenly realize you do not remember walking into it. That is what my life feels like sometimes when I look back. I spent most of it walking forward without ever stopping to ask where I was going or why. I do not want you to make that same mistake. I am not here to lecture you. I am 90 years old. I have earned the right to be honest, not the right to tell you how to live. So I am just going to talk. The way I would talk to my son if I thought he had enough patience to sit and listen for a while. The way I would have talked to myself if the younger version of me had been wise enough to sit still. Let me go back. Back to when I was young, and the world felt like something you could conquer if you just worked hard enough. I was raised by a man who believed in work the way some people believe in religion. My father, Harold, woke up before the sun every single morning of his adult life. I watched him do it from the time I was old enough to notice. He never complained about it. He never explained it either. It was just what men did. You got up, you worked, you provided. That was the whole philosophy. 3 words, no footnotes. I absorbed that completely. I did not question it. Why would I? It seemed to work. My father was respected in Fairhope. People nodded when he walked past. He kept the lights on. He kept food on the table. In the world I grew up in, that was the definition of a good man, so I became that man. I studied hard. I got into a decent school. I came out with a degree in business administration, and I walked straight into the working world with my jaw set and my shoulders back, and this absolute certainty that if I just kept moving forward, everything would fall into place. And for a long time, it seemed like I was right. I climbed. That is the only word for it. I climbed steadily, consistently, the way my father had taught me to work. First a small firm in Birmingham, then a larger one. By my mid-30s, I was managing a department. By 40, I was running a division. I made good money. I wore good suits. I drove a car that turned heads. Ruth and I bought a house that was more than we needed, and I remember feeling proud of that. Proud that I had given her more than my father had been able to give my mother. I thought that was love. I really did. I thought providing was the same thing as being present. My son Thomas was born in 1963. My daughter Caroline came along 3 years later. They were good children. Easy children, people used to say, which I now understand to mean that they had learned not to ask too much of me. They knew I was busy. They accepted it the way children accept the weather, as something they cannot change, and therefore stop fighting. I did not see that then. I saw a father who came home every evening, who sat at the dinner table, who attended the important events, birthday parties, school plays, graduation. I showed up for the milestones. I told myself that was enough, that I was doing better than most. Maybe I was doing better than some, but better than some is not the same as good enough. There was a Saturday morning, I must have been in my early 40s, when Thomas asked me if I wanted to go fishing with him. He was about 10 years old. He had this old rod that his grandfather had given him, and he had been out to the pond behind the Henderson property a few times with some of the neighborhood boys. That morning he came and stood in the doorway of my home office. I remember the way he stood there, hands at his sides, trying to look casual, trying not to look like he cared too much whether I said yes or no. I told him I had reports to finish. He nodded, said okay, and walked away. I went back to my papers. I finished those reports. I have no memory now of what was in them. Not a single word. But I can still see the way Thomas stood in that doorway, the way he tried not to look hopeful. I let him walk away. That is one memory, one Saturday morning. But there were hundreds of moments like it, maybe thousands, each one small, each one seemingly manageable, excusable. Taken together, they add up to something that cannot be undone. Ruth used to say gently, very gently, that I was always somewhere else even when I was in the room. I would laugh it off, tell her she was being unfair, tell her she did not understand the pressure I was under, the things I was trying to build for us. She would go quiet, not angry, just quiet. Ruth was not the kind of woman who argued. She expressed herself once, clearly, and then she let it be. I mistook her silence for agreement. It was not agreement. It was patience. And even patient people eventually run out of time. I want to talk about my friend Raymond for a moment, because his story is important. Raymond and I met in our 30s through work. He was the kind of man people admired immediately. Sharp mind, generous with a laugh, worked harder than almost anyone I have ever known. He built a logistics company from scratch, starting with one truck and a borrowed phone, and by the time he was 50, he had a fleet, a staff, and more money than he knew what to do with. He also had a son named Marcus, a quiet boy, thoughtful, the kind of kid who noticed things. Marcus used to come to Raymond's office sometimes after school, and Raymond would wave him toward the couch in the corner and tell him to do his homework while he finished his calls. That was their time together. Marcus doing homework on a couch while his father worked. Raymond died at 63. A stroke. Fast and final. I went to the funeral. I sat near the back, and I watched Marcus stand at the podium to speak about his father. Marcus was in his late 20s by then, and he tried. He truly tried to find the words, but what came out was thin, polite. The kind of eulogy you give for someone you respected but did not truly know. Marcus talked about his father's work ethic, about his accomplishments, about what he had built. He did not tell a single story about the two of them together. Not one. Because there were not many stories to tell. That was Raymond's legacy. Not his company, not his fleet. His legacy was a son who stood at his graveside searching for memories and coming up mostly empty. I thought about that for a long time after. I thought about what my own children would say at my funeral. I thought about how many real stories we had, how many afternoons, how many conversations that actually went somewhere. And I was not sure I liked the answer, but I kept going. That is the honest truth. I heard that warning. I felt it in my chest and I kept going, because I told myself I had time. That was the lie I lived inside for decades. I have time. I will do it later. When things slow down, when the kids are older, when I retire, when I have more to show for it all, someday. I will do it someday. I want to stop here and ask you something. Not in a dramatic way, just as a genuine question. How many times have you said someday to yourself this month? How many things are you saving for later? How many conversations have you been meaning to have? How many people are you meaning to call? I am not asking to make you feel guilty. I am asking because I know what someday turns into. I lived it. Someday turns into years. Years turn into decades. And then one morning you are my age, and you are sitting in a quiet house, and you are trying to remember the last time you really sat with the people you love, and the answer makes you go still. Now let me tell you about January of 1996. I was 60 years old. I had been working for almost 4 decades without stopping. I was at the peak of everything I had spent my life building. The office, the title, the reputation, and my heart gave out. I was at my desk. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I remember the light through the window, the particular angle of winter light in January. I remember reaching for a file and feeling something shift inside my chest. Not pain at first, pressure, then pain. The kind of pain that takes all the sound out of the room. I woke up in a hospital bed. The doctor, a young man, younger than my son, came in and said something I have never forgotten. He said, "You are a lucky man, Mr. Larry." Another 10 minutes, and this conversation would not be happening. Lucky. I was lucky. I lay there in that hospital bed for 4 days. Ruth sat beside me every single hour that they allowed her. She held my hand and she did not say "I told you so," though she had the right to. She just sat with me. And I looked at her, really looked at her. And I thought, when did she get older? When did I stop noticing? Those 4 days were the quietest I had been in 40 years. No phone, no reports, no decisions. Just the sound of machines and Ruth's breathing and my own thoughts, which I had been avoiding for most of my adult life. I thought about my father. He had died when I was 47. A sudden thing. Heart trouble also, which I suppose I should have taken as a warning. We had a complicated relationship, my father and I. He was not a cruel man, but he was not warm either. He showed love the only way he knew, which was by working and providing, just as I had learned to do. In his last years, I had told myself we would repair things, have the conversations we had never had. I would sit with him on his porch, and we would finally talk like 2 men who had known each other a long time. I kept meaning to drive out to see him. I kept meaning to call. I never did. Not in the way that mattered. He died, and we never had those conversations. I stood at his grave and I felt something I did not have a name for at the time. I understand it now. It was the weight of everything unsaid. And there I was, lying in that hospital bed 13 years later, having learned nothing. There is something that happens when you are truly still for the first time in years. Your mind shows you things you have been too busy to look at. Like walking into a room that has not been opened in a long time, and seeing everything that has been sitting there in the dark. I saw Thomas. I saw the fishing rod. I saw every Saturday morning I had spent at my desk instead of with my son. I saw Caroline, my daughter, who had stopped trying to talk to me about her life somewhere in her teenage years, not from lack of love, but from the simple logic of trying and not being received. She had stopped bringing her thoughts to me because I had given her no real evidence that I had time for them. I saw Ruth, 35 years of marriage, a good woman, a patient woman, and I had been there for most of it in body, but not fully in spirit. I had been the man who provided. I had not always been the man who was truly present. I saw my brother William. He lived 3 hours away. We had drifted, not because of any falling out, just because of distance and busyness and the assumption that he would always be there. He died 4 years after my heart attack, colon cancer. We had reconnected somewhat in those 4 years, which I am grateful for. But there was so much time we had let go before that, and none of it came back. I saw the book I had always meant to write. Nothing grand, just a record of things I had learned, stories from my life, something that might have been useful to someone younger. I had been saying I would write it since my 40s. I never did. I saw the trip to Europe that Ruth and I had been talking about since our honeymoon. We had always said we would go when the children were older, when we could really enjoy it, when we retired. Ruth got sick 2 years into our retirement. We never went. None of these are dramatic stories. That is the point I keep coming back to. None of these are moments of sudden catastrophe. They are just the quiet, steady accumulation of delay, of later, of someday. That is how most regret is built. Not in one terrible decision. In 1,000 small ones that each seemed perfectly reasonable at the time. After the heart attack, I changed. Slowly. Imperfectly. I am not going to tell you I walked out of that hospital a new man, because that is not how it works. Old habits are not overwritten easily. But something had shifted permanently. I knew it from the moment I sat up in that bed and looked out the window at the winter sky. I knew that whatever time I had left was not a resource to be managed. It was the only thing that actually mattered. I started spending Saturdays with Thomas. He was in his 30s by then, with his own life, his own busy schedule. But I kept asking. And slowly, carefully, we built something. We went fishing eventually. Years later than we should have, but we went. And I will tell you that sitting beside my son at the edge of a quiet pond, saying nothing in particular, was one of the best mornings of my life. Better than any promotion. Better than any deal I ever closed. I started asking Caroline about her life. Really asking. Listening all the way through, not just waiting for my turn to respond. She would look at me sometimes with this expression I can only describe as cautious. Like she was not entirely sure this was real. Like she was waiting for me to check my watch, or redirect the conversation back to something practical. I cannot blame her for that. I had given her reason for that caution. I told Ruth things I'd been carrying quietly for decades. Nothing confessional or dramatic, just honesty. The kind of honesty that builds up between two people when one of them has been too proud or too busy to speak plainly for too long. She received it without ceremony. That was Ruth. She did not need me to perform. She just needed me to show up honestly, and I finally did. Those years after 60 were different. Not perfect, not without difficulty, but different in a way that mattered. I was present for them in a way I had not been before. And now I am 90. I outlived my wife. I outlived Raymond and William and several others I was close to. I sit most evenings in a chair near the window, and I watch the light change, and I think. Not with bitterness. That would be a waste of what is left. But with a clarity that only comes from having enough distance from everything. And what I see with that clarity is this. The idea that success would satisfy me was never true. I know that now, as well as I know anything. Every achievement I chased brought a moment of satisfaction, and then almost immediately raised a new bar. There was always more to prove, always another level. And I spent decades on that wheel, running, believing I was getting somewhere, not realizing that the destination kept moving. I was successful by almost any measure the world uses. And in my last 40 years of reflection, I have come to understand that success was the wrong goal entirely. Not because achievement is bad, but because I treated it as an end in itself, rather than a means toward something that actually mattered. I was so focused on building something that I forgot to notice what I was losing in the process. The things that filled my final years with actual warmth were not the things I achieved. They were the conversations. The ordinary Tuesday evenings with Ruth watching something on television and arguing about whether to change the channel. The phone calls with Caroline that ran long because we had finally found our rhythm. The afternoons with my grandchildren who looked at me with a kind of open curiosity that I found more valuable than any boardroom respect I had ever earned. Those were the things. Not the title, not the house, not the car that turned heads. I want to speak to you now, directly, not as a lecture, just as one person to another. If you are young, whether that means 20 or 30 or 40 or even 50, you are standing somewhere that I cannot return to. You have something I would give everything I own to have back for just 1 year. You have time. Not infinite time, not unlimited time, but time that I no longer have. Please do not waste it the way I wasted mine. I am not saying abandon your ambitions. Work hard, build things. Achieve what you are capable of achieving. None of that is wrong. But do not make it the whole of your life. Do not make it your only measure of yourself. Do not let it eat the years when your children are small, when your parents are still alive, when your friendships are young and easy, when your body can still do the things you always said you would do someday. Someday is not a day of the week. Discipline matters. I learned that from my father, and I still believe it. But discipline in service of what? That is the question I never asked myself early enough. I was disciplined in service of my career, of accumulation, of an image of success that I had absorbed from the culture around me, without ever stopping to examine whether it was actually what I wanted. Discipline without direction is just motion, and motion is not the same as progress toward anything that actually matters to you. Know yourself. Spend time on that. More time than I did. I was so busy becoming the man the world seemed to want that I never fully figured out who I actually was beneath all of that. What I really valued. What kind of life would have actually satisfied me. I found some of those answers after 60, in the hospital bed and in the quiet years that followed. But I wish I had looked sooner. Love the people you love out loud, and now, not later. Call them. Visit them. Have the hard conversations before it is too late. Tell people what they mean to you before there is a grave between you. I know that sounds simple. I know you already know this. But knowing it and living it are two different things. And I am telling you from 90 years of experience that most people live the knowing and not the doing, until suddenly the chance is gone. Take care of your body. I do not say that as a health lecture. I say it because your body is what allows you to be present. When it falters, and it will eventually falter for all of us, the things you did not do become vivid and irreversible. I was lucky at 60, many are not. Do not bet your future on that kind of luck. Write things down, not for the world, for yourself, for your children, for the people who will want to know who you were when you are no longer here to tell them. I regret not doing this more than almost anything else. My grandchildren ask me questions sometimes, and I realize how much of my own history I have let fade. Not written down, not recorded, not passed on. A life lived without record disappears very quickly. And rest, genuinely rest. Not the distracted rest of scrolling and half attention. Real stillness. Sit with your own thoughts. Let yourself be bored sometimes. Give your mind the space to show you what is actually in it. I ran from stillness for most of my life because when I stopped moving I had to think. And thinking meant confronting things I preferred to avoid. Do not make that mistake. The things you avoid do not disappear. They wait. I am nearly done. There is not much of me left in terms of time. I know that, and I have made my peace with it. I do not fear death the way I once did. What I fear, and I say this honestly, is wasted time. Because death is not a tragedy. We all arrive at it eventually. But a life where the best and truest parts of you never got to breathe fully, where the love you had never got fully expressed, where the things that mattered most to you were always the things you planned to attend to later, that is the loss that sits with me. I have had good years. The last 30 years were better than I deserved, honestly, given how I spent the 30 before them. I found my way to presence, to honesty, to time with the people I love. It was late, but it was real. My Ruth is gone. My brother William is gone. Raymond is gone. Many of the people who shaped my life have already left this world. I sit here with my memories of them, and I feel the full weight of what time is. It is not a resource. It is not something you manage. It is your life. Every hour of it. And once it passes, it does not come back. So if you take anything from what I have said today, let it be this. Not as advice, just as a truth from someone who has had 90 years to see it clearly. The things you are waiting for permission to do them. The people you have been meaning to reach out to, reach out. The life you have been meaning to start living it. Not perfectly. Not after you have figured everything out. Now, with what you have. where you are. Because I promise you, from the other side of a very long life, that later is not as dependable as it sounds. If something I said today stayed with you, sit with it for a while. You do not have to do anything dramatic, just sit with it. And if you feel moved to share it with someone you know who might need to hear it, share it. Quietly, without pressure. I am David Larry. I am 90 years old. I have lived a full life, and I have missed parts of it that I can never go back to. I am at peace with that mostly. But I want something better for you. Take your time seriously, not because it is running out, though it is, for all of us, but because it is the only thing you actually have. Everything else, the work, the money, the reputation, all of it comes and goes. The hours of your life are the only currency that cannot be earned back once it is spent. Spend it on what is true. Spend it on who you love. Spend it on becoming the person you actually want to be, not the person the world around you decided you should be. That is all I have. That is everything. And so, here I am. 90 years old, sitting in this chair, hoping that something I said today lands somewhere it is needed. I did not tell you my story to impress you. I told it because I wish someone had told it to me when I still had the time to do something about it. If these words meant something to you today, if even one sentence made you pause and think about your own life, then this old man has done something worthwhile with his afternoon. Do me a small kindness in return. Subscribe to this channel so the next time I sit down to share something true, you will be the first to hear it. Hit that bell notification so nothing passes you by. Leave a comment below. Tell me what stayed with you, or share something from your own life. I read them. Every one. Like this video if it touched you, and share it with someone you love, someone who might need to hear it today. We are all just people trying to figure this out before time runs out. Thank you for sitting with me. I am David Larry, and I am grateful you were here.